2 of my HTML and CSS course for beginners. My name is Abi. So in my previous lecture, if you haven't watched that, we talked about what is HTML, why we use it, and a bunch of other things. And I also talked about the HTML structure. So if you haven't watched that yet, please do. It's a continuation for this lecture. So in this lecture, we're going to learn about the HTML structure more in depth. We kind of talked about it in the last lecture, but I wanted to put a more in-depth explanation in this lecture. Then after that, we're going to talk about heading and paragraph tags, where you're going to write your first HTML code, which is exciting. And then we're also going to learn about the CSS styling properties we can use for both, and mainly the heading and paragraph tags. And then we're also going to learn about IDs and classes at the end, which will simplify the CSS styling process a lot. So let's get started. Let's first start with the HTML structure. So in the last lecture, like I said, we covered the basics and what tags are included, but we really didn't cover how to write them and the syntax. So we're going to cover that in this lecture. And if you haven't set up the HTML and CSS files, I talked about that in the last lecture, and you can just go back to the last lecture and you can do that and come back here. So let me just recap what we learned about the HTML structure in the last lecture real quick, and then we get to the new stuff. So the first thing is the doc type HTML, and remember the doc type is the doc type word is all capitals, and the HTML is all lowercase. And then what this does is basically it says that the HTML file, which is this file, cannot be interpreted as any other file. It cannot be interpreted as a CSS file, any file like a text file, anything. And it also says that the HTML file should only be interpreted as the latest file. It cannot be a previous version, and the current HTML version is HTML5. So yeah, that's basically all about the doc type HTML. Now let's get to the HTML tag. So this is the HTML tag. So the HTML tag is basically contains the whole web page, and it's basically the root of the whole web page, basically just containing everything. Every tag that is in the web page goes between the HTML tag. Next we have the head tag. So the head tag is not visible. None of the HTML structure tags are visible, but what it is just the top. So what goes between the head tag is the title tag. So the title tag, let me just put the L there. So the title tag is basically what we would see here. So if I put website in between, website, and we refresh, and here it is. So this is the title tag. So it just displays website there. You can put anything between it, and it'll just come up in the tab. It's just basically the tab name. You usually see this on websites, like modern websites, where they say their website name and everything. But that's what the title tag is in charge of. So the next tag is the body tag, which goes between the head and the HTML tag. And this is the closing HTML tag. So it goes between the closing head tag and the closing HTML tag. So the body tag just contains everything in the white space. So whatever you put between the body tag appears in the white space, and it just contains all the main content of the web page. So now let's understand syntax. So syntax applies to any programming language, no matter like what programming language you're programming in, syntax always applies, because syntax is how the code is written. So for HTML syntax, it's really easy. It's just opening angle bracket, tag name. The tag name, like body tag is a tag name, title tag is a tag name, head tag is a title tag. So you basically head tag is a tag name. You basically get the point there. Then we have a closing angle bracket. Oh, sorry for that. And let me just, for now, let's just put it on one line. And now, so now, Visual Studio Code, when you just put the closing angle bracket for the opening tag, it basically just generates the closing tag. So what is the difference between the opening tag and the closing tag? So the difference in between the opening tag and the closing tag is a forward slash in the closing tag. The forward slash indicates that the tag is ending. You're ending the tag. So this is a closing tag. Usually closing tags are for these are for the closing tags. Yeah. But so basically when you have an opening and closing tag, content goes between the tags. So remember that. And it's basically just simple. Opening angular bracket, tag name, closing angular bracket. Then we have a opening angular bracket again, forward slash tag name, closing angular bracket. So yeah, and Visual Studio Code usually just generates the closing tag for you. Alright, so that is all about HTML structure. So in the next we're gonna learn about the heading and paragraph tags. So I'll see you there, guys. Now we're gonna learn about the heading and paragraph tags in HTML. So first let's start with the heading tag. So the heading tag is written as H1, and we're also gonna learn about the why it's called an H1 and why it's not called a heading tag. But basically let's say we put like welcome to Codatory Labs. Wait 1 second. Welcome to Codatory Labs. So there we go, it appears here. And yeah, whatever content you put between the H1 tag appears here. And this is the default font size. So font size is the size of the text. So the default font size is this. So we can, with CSS, we can make it smaller, which we'll learn about later in this video. But basically, we can make, this is what an H1 looks like. So now we're gonna learn about why it's not called an H1, why it's called an H1 and why it's not called a heading. So basically, it's called an H1 because there are different levels. There are different sizes by default to heading tags. So if we put another heading tag, or if we put H2, we can see that it has a big difference. So if I say that, and now it appears a bit smaller to the H1 tag. So now we see why it's called an H1 instead of a heading, because there are different levels. 1 means the biggest, 2 means a bit smaller, and then let me just copy this. Let's see the others. 1 second, that's not correctly copy. Sorry about this, guys, but okay, so I'm gonna paste 6 or far. There we go. So 1, 4, and then we need another one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so there we go, 6. Now we're gonna replace the numbers with 3, like 4, 5, and 6. Alright, so we're gonna replace everything by the numbers. And the max is 6. We can't go to 8, 7 or anything, but now we see the big difference between every one of them. 6 we can already tell is like the smallest. 5 is a bit bigger. Then 4, 3, and 2. So if we go from H1, 2 is a bit smaller, 3 gets smaller, 4 gets smaller and smaller, 5, and then 6. So that it just goes by those levels. Now, we need to talk about something incredibly important. So we need to talk about block, inline, and inline block elements. So the H1 tag is an example of a block. So what does block mean in HTML? Block means that this H1 tag is actually part of a container, and we'll see about that in a different lecture in this course when we introduce div tags. But for right now, just understand that the block element takes up the whole space. So there's no space for the h2 tag to go up here beside the h1 tag unless you style it with CSS. But it's just a stack, so everything goes by a block. So like if you put a block, you put a block on top, and then another block on top. So it's like that. So then now let's talk about the inline element. So the inline is basically the container of the tag just takes up its own space. So we can have multiple elements on the same line until this line is like no more space. We're out of space. You need to go to the next line. So that's basically what inline is. And inline block is just a mix of both. You just have a mix of both worlds, and you can just use both of them. Like, yeah, it's just content of both worlds. Alright, so now and then let's talk about paragraph tags. So paragraph tags are written as P, and there are no other types of paragraph tags like there are with HTML, so it's just the P tag. So now whatever we put in the paragraph tag is always showing up here, just like any h1 tag. So let's put welcome, or let's do a description, because descriptions are pretty much what a paragraph tags are used for. So Codatory Labs is my favorite. So let's do that. And then, okay, there we go, that's saved. And basically this is the default font size for it. And paragraph tags are also block tags, so everything comes below it. It's like a stack. So if I put another paragraph tag here, we can just say welcome. So if I put another paragraph tag below it, it just goes below. Unless you start with CSS as an inline, or an inline block, it won't go beside the first paragraph tag. So that's all about paragraph tags, and remember that opening and closing tag. And then if you have an opening and closing tag, content goes between it. So now next, we are going to learn about CSS styling, what CSS stylings we can use for both H1 and the paragraph tag, or heading tag and paragraph tags. And then we're also going to learn about how we can switch between inline block, and inline. So I'll see you there, guys. So now we're going to talk about the CSS styling for the heading tags, paragraph tags, and yeah. Alright, so first let me create a heading tag, and we're just gonna say welcome to Codatory Labs. So welcome to Codatory Labs. So we have that there. Now let's go to style.css. Alright, before we go, actually, we're going to put a link. So I'm just going to type link like this and press enter. So now it just does some things for us, and so it just does these things for us. And what rel and ref are attributes, they're attributes, and we're going to discuss these later. But rel is the short for relationship, and CSS is a style sheet for HTML. It's basically the styling language. So we put a relationship as a style sheet. And then href is high reference. So a high reference, so if we put a style for welcome to Codatory Labs, it should, so basically what HTML will do is it'll go into the CSS style to reference what style we used, and it will apply that to welcome to Codatory Labs. So whereas href, what we're going to do is we're going to put style.css, because that is our file name. Now we're gonna go into style.css. So the syntax for style.css. And remember, syntax, or not style.css, CSS. But the syntax, remember, is how the code is written. So CSS has its own syntax. So the syntax is the selector. We first start with the selector. So what is the selector? So the selector is like the tag name, what we're selecting to style. And what we're going to put is H1. We're selecting the H1 and we're going to style it. So now this is the selector, then we put open in curly brackets and we hit enter. Alright, so the first thing I want to show you is font family. And font family is a styling property, and these are just properties you can use to style. They're just like this, they're called styling properties. So font family basically is the font. The font, like where you in Google Docs, you go to font, you can change the font style and everything. That is what font family is, and font family is what you would put in CSS. So I'm just gonna put a random font, Lucidistance. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm just gonna put just now. Also, you want to put a semicolon at the end. And what this, what Lucidistance, or I don't know what it does, but we have it right here. So this is what Lucidistance looks like, it seems, and it pretty much changes a lot. So this is what font family does. It just is how you can change the look of the text like you would do in Google Docs or anything. Now the second one we're going to look at, I'm going to keep font family there. So the next one I'm going to look at is how we can change text color. That is a big thing when you create websites. So to change text color, it is not going to be text color, if you guys guessed that, but it's going to be color. It's just color. Now the color can be anything. If you don't know what color you want to go for, there is a color picker inbuilt into Visual Studio Code. So let me just put like white for now. And it's just going to disappear because of the white background. But if I go here, if I hover over this like little square that pops up, we have a color picker, which is very cool in Visual Studio Code, and we can just select. So I'm going to select like a blue kind of shade, and I'm just going to put it right there. And yeah, it should appear anytime now, and here it is, the blue text. Okay, so now don't worry about RGB, but right now, welcome to Codetery Labs. Is a blue text, and text color is not, don't forget that it's not text color, and it's color. So this is what color does, it changes the text color. Now, I want to show you another website you can find colors. So if you don't know what color you're supposed to use, you can go to, or what color you want to use, you can go to 147colors.com. And basically this takes us to this website. And it was 147, but now they're like there's just one more color, like 148 colors now. But it's still called 147colors.com. But anyway, we have so many colors, and we even have different sections. And why there are different sections is because there are different shades of each color. So we can see what colors, and all of these colors are available in CSS, so it doesn't matter which color you use. So we can just, let's say corn silk. I love corn, or not corn silk, that's a bit bright. So we're going to go with crimson. So we're going to go back to our website, and basically we're going to just adjust this to crimson. And don't forget to put your semicolon again. And then it changes to a red color. So this is what basically what 147 colors is. So if you don't need to memorize any color. Pretty much every color you think about will be allowed. But if you want to have a more insight about what colors are allowed, you can go to 147colors.com, or you can access the color picker with Visual Studio Code. It just puts in an RGB thing, but at least you got your colors, so you don't need to worry about the RGB. But yeah, so I'm going to leave the color there. Now we're going to talk about how to increase the size of the text, and that is what font size does. So we can put font size, and basically we're going to just basically we're just going to, we can put any size. So now we are going to talk about the unit of styling. So the unit is pixels. So representing pixels is px. That's how we represent pixels. So I'm going to just put 30 pixels. And when it comes to measurements, you really just have to experiment with what you know. I'm just going to probably put like 100 pixels to see a difference. Alright, so there it goes, that difference. The change is appearing. So this is what 100 pixels is. So you just, when it comes to measurements, you really have to experiment with CSS because no one is going to have like infinite amount of measurements memorized into their brain, and how do they look. So you just gotta experiment because I don't remember what 100 pixels will look like, so I'm probably just gonna forget it. So that's why you just need to experiment with everything, and that, yeah, when it comes to measurements, it's all about experiment with CSS. Alright, so I'm gonna decrease this, it's a bit too big. Alright, so this is good enough. Now we're going to talk about display. So the display, we previously we talked about that heading tags are block elements, which it takes up the whole space of the container, and everything will come below it. Any other tag will come below it. So yeah, but now let's say I want to make the heading tag, or make another heading tag come beside the Welcome to Codeterry Labs, this heading tag. So I'm just going to decrease the font size back to, I'm just going to remove this. At least now we get the points of font size, so I'm just going to remove it. And we can really see a fitting difference here. So now I'm going to go back into my index.html file, hit enter, and put a new heading tag here. And I'm not going to put an H2 or anything, but if you want to do it, you can. Alright, so I'm going to put like Codeterry Labs. Codeterry Labs is my favorite. Alright, so we have that. Now it comes below this. But now I want it to come beside the Welcome to Codeterry Labs heading. So the way we can do that is making the Welcome to Codeterry Labs heading, the first heading we can make the display. So this is the display property. We can make this inline. So now both of them come beside each other. And if you want to remove the space, it kind of looks close, you can add margin. So this is another property that adds space between two elements. So margin 10 pixels. Let's do that. And there we go, it adds some space there. So that's margin. But I'm gonna keep it there. Alright, so now we're going to do inline block. And inline block is pretty much the same thing, really. It's just both of everything. It gives you more styling enhancements with CSS. That's the only thing it does, but it's just pretty much the same as inline. But yeah, so that is the block, inline, and how you can switch between both of them. So I'm just gonna remove this margin. And basically, it's the same with the paragraph tag. All of these are the same. Like literally all of them, like what we talked about, are applied to the paragraph tag too. So let's say I put the paragraph tag and I delete my H1 tags and put a paragraph tag. I can do welcome to Codeterry Labs, and if we put that, it appears here. And we're going to change the selector. Since we don't have any more H1 tags, we're just going to change the selector. And now the CSS styles apply to the paragraph tag now that we change the selector. But we don't like the font size, so we're going to just, like we said, to change the size of the text, we're going to put font size. And I'm just going to increase it to 30 pixels. And there we go. So basically, even if you use a paragraph tag, you can just pretty much get it like a heading tag. You can just pretty much get it like an H1 tags style of size. So, but yeah, I'm not gonna go over anything else, but though the every style we just talked about, the heading tag also applies to the paragraph tag. So now in the next, we're gonna learn about the IDs and classes, which really simplify the process of styling. So we're also gonna learn all the problems of selecting by tag name. Alright, so I'll see you there, guys. So now we're going to talk about IDs and classes. These things, this concept really is the most important thing we need to talk about, because there's a problem with our styling process right now, and IDs and classes are gonna really fix that. So first, we're gonna talk about what an ID is before we talk about classes. But an ID, basically, let's first talk about our problem. What is this problem with our styling process? So right now, I put back the H1 tag and remove the P tag, by the way. But right now, we have our H1 tag. We have our heading tag, right? So when we select it here, but what if I put another H1 tag? Let's say we put another heading tag and we say pizza. I'm not gonna put, well, Code Labs is my favorite, but I'm gonna put pizza. So pizza, so basically, when we style with the tag name as a selector, it applies to both of them. It applies to both heading tags. But let's say I wanted both heading tags to have a different styles. So that's where IDs come in. And the way we can add an ID is we go between the tag name, the end of the tag name, and we go space ID, and we put heading. So this is our ID, heading, and it has to be in double or single quotes, whatever you want. And then yeah, it goes, so between the end of the heading, end of the tag name, and the closing angular bracket of the opening tag. Don't put in the closing tag, put in the opening tag. So now when we put ID heading, it still does the same thing, because we haven't styled heading. But before we do that, I want to talk about what ID is. ID is an attribute. And what attributes are is that they let us modify a tag. And they just let us modify what we can do with the tag. So that's basically what an attribute is. It's pretty simple. But yeah. So now let's put ID as a different ID for the other heading tag. So we're gonna put heading 2. Let's just do that simple for now. But now we still have the same thing. That's because we haven't styled heading and heading 2. So our selector is still on H1. So the way we can do this is by selecting this ID instead, and our styles are removed, but we can select the IDs instead. So to select an ID into CSS, we had to put hashtag and our ID name. So our ID name is heading, so I'm just gonna copy that, and we're gonna put it here. When I do this, the styles apply only to the first heading tag. Amazing, right? Let's go. So that is what an ID is. So I'm gonna copy this and put a different style for this. Heading 2. So heading 2, then we're gonna put curly brackets, or opening closing curly brackets. Sorry, I forgot to put remember to put always the hashtag, very important. And basically now we're gonna style the heading 2. So let's put the font family, or I'm not gonna style the font family really, but let's put our color as blue. Color blue. Okay, I'm gonna put blue here. Alright, there we go. Alright, so now it changes to blue. And now we have 2 different styles. So this is what IDs allow us to do. So I'm going to put font size to this and let's see what happens. 90 pixels. And this applies to the second one, and only the second one is affected. Only the second one switches to 90 pixels of font size, and the first one just remains the same. So this is what IDs allow us to do. Now let's talk about classes. So classes are a bit different, or actually pretty different to IDs. And I'm just going to remove these styles. I'm just going to remove the selector, and we are just going to return them to their normal styles. And now we're going to introduce classes. So what a class is basically, let's see. So right now the problem with IDs is that you can't put heading and heading. You can't put the same name for IDs. You had to put in unique, but that's not like the real thing right now. The real thing is, let's say I want these both to have the same style. I want both of them to have the same style, but I don't want the third. If I put a third heading tag, I don't want that one to have the same style. I want that one to have a different style. So the way we can do that is by the class. This allows us to style multiple elements with the same style, but not affecting any other tags in our code. So let's put heading and now I don't even need, I could just put class, and class is just another attribute, and I don't need to put 2 here because classes allow us to have the same name for everything, and whatever the class applies to that's the style. So style applies to that class. So if we put class heading, how do we access it in CSS? So instead of a hashtag, we would put a dot, then we would put in heading. So now both headings have the same style. But now what happens if I put another heading tag? So I'm going to put H3 this time just to experiment with the other one. So other levels of the heading tag. Now we're going to put pizza is my favorite. Yummy. Alright. Pizza is my favorite. And there we go. Now the third heading tag, as we can see, is not affected because we don't have the class heading is not in the third heading tag, so it does not affect. So the styles of the class heading don't affect the third heading tag. This is what classes allow us to do. So now that is pretty much all about class IDs and classes, pretty much what you need to know for now. And I'm just going to remove all these styles. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few other styling techniques. So let's say I don't want this white background. I don't want it, it's so boring. So if you're thinking like this, I got you covered. So the way we can switch the background color of our web page is by styling it with the background color property. So the background color property is really just changing the background color. So the way we can do this is by selecting by HTML, or we can select it by body, whichever you want. I prefer body because it allows for more styling. So usually if I would recommend the ones that allow for more styling flexibility. That's the one you will probably want to use. So now we're going to put that. So body is our selector, and then we have our opening curly brackets. So now we are going to change the background color. So pretty straightforward. It's background color. I forgot to mention also put the colons. Alright, so now we can, like I said, any color you pretty much think of should work. If you don't know, then either do the color picker thing I showed you, or you can do the 147colors.com. See what colors are available. I would say if you want to go for a unique color, it's better to use the Visual Studio Code color picker, or if you want to just know what colors are available, you go for 147colors.com. So now we're just gonna switch this to blue. blue is one of my favorite colors, by the way. And we're gonna switch that to blue. Semicolon, and yeah, there's our background color switched to blue. Now, so that's basically background color. I would recommend putting body instead of HTML. If you want to put HTML, you can. There are no restrictions. It's just that body allows for more styling flexibility. And like I said, usually the styling way you do for CSS that it enhances styling flexibility is what you want to use, because it could be helpful in the future. So now we're going to learn how to add a background using background color for a heading tag. So we're going to remove the body, and we are going to add a heading tag. So I'm going to add Codetary Labs, and now I'm gonna put an ID because I do not want to. I want to get you more into IDs and classes than putting it by the tag name, because that's really what you're gonna do when you're moving forward. So I'm just gonna get you used to that. So we're not gonna use tag names really much anymore. We might use them a bit, but we will mostly use IDs and classes. So I'm just gonna get you guys used to that. Very important. So I'm gonna just put ID heading, and we are going to, or not ID, I don't know why I'm doing that, but we're gonna put a hashtag, remember, hashtag, then we're gonna put heading. We're selecting our heading, ID, and we're gonna put our opening closing brackets, and we want to style this with a background color. No other styles for now, we're just gonna style with background color. So background color, same property. Now we're gonna put, let's say blue, like we just did. Now we're gonna put blue there, and there we go. Background color is blue. And again, let's work with a bit of display, the display property. So remember, the heading tag is by default a block element. But when you put background color, you really see that it's taking up the whole space, like it's in its own container. You really see the container, and the container is basically just a box. It's the box around the element. And we'll see this more with div tags when we learn about div tags. So now, I want to make this only, I want to make it allowable, so where another tag will go in here. I'm not going to put another tag, but I'm just going to make it more pretty, because you usually don't want something just stretching out like this. So we're going to put display, display, and then we're going to put inline-block. Inline-block is probably better than inline, because inline does not have the much styling flexibility as inline-block. Inline-block gives you more styling flexibility, so I just recommend you guys use inline-block, and inline-block are pretty much the same thing anyway. So yeah, now when we do display inline-block, we see our stretched out background is now only up to the container. It's only up to the heading tag's size. So it takes up its own space. So that is that, and it's the same with the paragraph tag. If you guys want to do the paragraph tag, I'm not going to show it, but if you guys want to experiment with that, you can too. It's just the same thing. Alright, that is all for this lecture. So let's recap. So what we learned in this lecture was we learned about the HTML structure more in depth. We learned about how to link our CSS file to our HTML file. And we also learned about heading and paragraph tags, and we learned about the CSS styling for that, and we also learned about IDs and classes. So in the next lecture, we're going to learn about anchor and image tags. And a head start, anchor is a link tag. The image tag is pretty much how it sounds. Just adds an image to the web page. So I'll see you there, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please put a like for this button. Subscribe, it's free, and I hope to see you in my next lecture where we talk about anchor and image tags. Thank you for watching.